Welcome to Algebra 1, Unit 7, Lesson 10 Practice Problems. We're going to start this lesson with the vocabulary terms so that we understand what they mean if we see them in the practice problems. Coefficient is when a number is being multiplied by a variable. For example, 3x plus 2, the coefficient is 3. Next, we talk about constant term. This is when a number is by itself. For instance, in 5x plus 2, the constant is 2. When a variable is changed, it does not affect the constant. Next, we talk about linear terms. In a standard form quadratic expression, the linear term is the bx term. And finally, we talk about zero product property. This says that if we multiply two things together and get 0 as an answer, then one of the two things we multiplied together must be 0. If you have any questions about any of these vocabulary terms, please use class time to ask for further clarification before we move on to the practice problems. To write 11x plus 17x minus 10 in factored form, Diego first listed pairs of factors of negative 10. So we have positive 5, negative 2, positive 2, negative 5, positive 10, negative 1, and positive 1, negative 10. Number 1, use what Diego started to complete the writing. Number 2, how did you know you found the right pair of expressions? What did you look for when trying to figure out different possibilities? So, we know that we're going to need to create 11x squared. The only factors of 11x squared would be x and 11x. When we put these in here, remember when we do FOIL, you would end up with whatever you put first being multiplied by whatever you put last, and then whatever is here will be multiplied by whatever you put second. And when you do that, they're going to add together to be positive 17x. So we need to try and see which ones work. If we tried x plus 5 and 11x minus 2, then when we use FOIL, we'll have negative 2x and positive 55x, and that's going to equal 53x. So this doesn't work. The other one we could try would be $11x plus 5 times x minus 2. Now we would have negative 22x plus x, or plus 5x, and this is going to give us negative 17x. But we need positive x, so it can't possibly be the first choice. So let's keep trying. Next, we could try x plus 2 times 11x minus 5. We would have x times negative 5, so that's negative 5x. And 2 times 11x would be plus 22x. And that would equal 17x. That's what we're trying to find. So the correct combination would be putting x in this one and 11x in this one. If you have any questions about how to solve a practice problem like this, please use class time to ask for further clarification before we move on to the next practice problem. Next practice problem. To rewrite 4x squared minus 12x minus 7 in factored form, Jada listed some pairs of factors of 4x squared. Use what Jada started to rewrite 4x squared minus 12x minus 7 in factored form. So what we're going to need are factors of negative 7 that add together to negative 12 when they're multiplied in one of these situations. So we could start with 2x. We're going to need opposite factors, and we're going to want the bigger one to be negative. So let's try negative 7 and positive 1. This would give us 4x squared. 2x times 1 would be 2x. Negative 7 times 2x is negative 14x. And negative 7 times 1 is negative 7. If we combine the like terms, this becomes 4x squared minus 12x minus 7. That's what we were trying to find. So the correct answers are going to be putting negative 7 in and positive 1. If you have any questions about how to solve a practice problem like this, please use class time to ask for further clarification before we move on to the next problem. Next practice problem. Rewrite each quadratic expression in factored form. Then use the zero product property to solve the equation. For number 1, I know that I need to create 7x squared, and the only factors of 7 are 1 and 7. So I'm going to say 7x times x. Then I look at my second symbol. It's a plus sign, so both signs have to be the same. By looking at the first sign, I know that both of those signs must be minus. And now I need factors of 3 that when one of them is multiplied by 7 and the other is multiplied by 1, and they are added together, they will create negative 22. So I am going to put the 3 opposite of the 7 and the 1 in the remaining spot. Because now, if I did FOIL, I would have 7x times x gives me 7x squared. 7x times negative 3 gives me negative 21x. And negative 1 times x gives me negative x. Combined, that would give me negative 22x. And negative 1 times 3 would give me positive 3. So this is the correct factored form. Now, using the zero product property, we're going to set each of those equal to 0. Either 7x minus 1 equals 0. We add 1 to both sides, and this becomes 7x equals 1. We divide both sides by 7, and this becomes x equals 1/7. Or x minus 3 equals 0. We add 3 to both sides, and this becomes x equals 3. So one correct solution is x equals 3. The other correct solution is that x equals 1/7. Number 2. I know that to create 4x squared, it can either be x times 4x or 2x times 2x. And I know that my numbers need to multiply to negative 5. And that can only be 1 and 5. So I'm going to try 4x times x. I know that because I have a negative or a minus sign for my second, they need to be opposites. And because my first sign is a plus, I know my larger one needs to have a plus sign. So we'll try it this way. The only factors of 5, negative 5, would be 1 and 5. So I'm going to swap these. I'm going to put the plus sign here and the negative sign here. I'm going to put the 1 here and the 5 here. Now if I tried 4x times x is 4x squared. 4x times negative 1 is negative 4x. 5 times x is positive 5x, so a negative 4x plus 5x would give me plus x. And finally, 5 times negative 1 is negative 5. So this is the correct factored form of number 2. Now, we set the first factor equal to 0. 4x plus 5 equals 0. We subtract 5 from both sides, and we get 4x equals negative 5. Divide both sides by 4, and we get our first answer, x equals negative 5/4. Then we set the other factor equal to 0, x minus 1 equals 0. We add 1 to both sides, and we get our second answer, x equals 1. And that would be the solutions to number 2. And finally, we look at number 3. We have 9x squared minus 25. And what I notice is that 9x squared is a perfect square and 25 is a perfect square. And there is a minus sign in between. We just talked on a previous lesson that when we have the same factors but opposite signs, it eliminates the linear term, the bx term. So if we used 3x plus 5 times 3x minus 5, 3x times 3x would be 9x squared. 3x times negative 5 would be negative 15x. Positive 5 times 3x would be 15x. And a negative 15x plus 15x is 0 and cancels out. And then 5 times negative 5 is negative 25. So this is the correct factored form of number 3. So first we'll set 3x plus 5 equal to 0. Subtract 5 from each side, and 3x equals negative 5. Divide both sides by 3, and we get our first answer of x equals negative 5/3. Then we take our second factor, 3x minus 5, and we set it equal to 0. We add 5 to both sides, and we get 3x equals positive 5. Divide both sides by 3, and we get our final answer of x equals 5/3. So this is how you would solve a practice problem like this. It requires you to build on all the knowledge that we've covered so far about how to factor, how to use FOIL, how to look at the signs and understand how that would turn into a factored form and solve for the solutions. If you have any questions about how to do a practice problem like this, please use class time to ask for further clarification before we move on to the next practice problem. In our last practice problem on Unit 7, Lesson 10, Han is solving the equation 5x squared plus 13x minus 6 equals 0. Here is his work. Describe Han's mistake, then find the correct solutions to the equation. So we have 5x squared plus 13x minus 6 equals 0. And then we have Han factoring it into 5x minus 2 times x plus 3. So if we looked at FOIL, 5x times x would be 5x squared. 5x times 3 would be 15x. Negative 2 times x would be minus 2x, and negative 2 times 3 would be minus 6. We combine the like terms. 5x squared plus 13x minus 6 equals 0. So Han was correct in how he found the factor. Now let's set each one equal to 0 and see what we would get. First, we let 5x minus 2 equal 0. We would add 2 to both sides and get 5x equals 2. Then we need to divide both sides by 5, and we get x equals 2 over 5. Han forgot to divide by 5. Now let's check the other one. If we let x plus 3 equal 0, we subtract 3 from both sides, and we get x equals negative 3. Han got that one correct. So the only mistake Han made was when he set the first factor equal to 0, he forgot to divide by 5. Or he might have divided by 5 wrongly by dividing first, but then not dividing the negative 2 by 5. So in the end, he still forgot to divide by 5, and the answer should have been 2 divided by 5, not just 2. If you have any questions about anything I covered on Unit 7, Lesson 10 practice problems, please use class time to ask for further clarification before we get to the test on Thursday.